What scares you more, a plane crash or a car accident? A shock attack or heart disease? If you answered the first one both times, you're not irrational, but you are wrong about where the danger is. Planes, 1 in 11,000 lifetime odds. Cars, 1 in 101. Shocks, 1 in 3.7 million. Heart disease kills 1 in 6 Americans every year. Your brain didn't miscalculate. It never calculated at all. This is called the availability bias. And it doesn't just distort what you fear, it distorts every decision you make about what is actually dangerous. Here's the core problem. Your brain doesn't calculate probability. It calculates ease of recall. When you try to assess how likely something is, your brain runs a quick search. How fast can I find an example of this? If examples come to mind quickly, your brain concludes this must happen a lot. If examples are hard to find, your brain concludes this must be rare. The problem is that ease of recall has nothing to do with actual frequency. It has everything to do with how vivid, how recent, and how emotionally loaded the memory is. Consider what happened after September 11, 2001. For months, images of planes and towers dominated every screen in America. Millions of Americans decided flying was too dangerous. They got in their cars instead. Gigerenzer at the Max Planck Institute calculated what happened next. In the 12 months following the attacks, 1,595 additional Americans died in car accidents, more than the total number killed in all 4 hijacked planes. The fear of flying killed more people than the hijackers did. This isn't a rare exception. This is the pattern. After every major market crash, investors pull out, not because the fundamentals changed, because recent vivid loss is screaming louder than decades of historical recovery data. After every headline about a rare disease, emergency rooms fill with people who don't have it because the story was available. Because available feels likely. And the most dangerous part? The risks that don't make headlines, the ones that kill the most people quietly every year, never become available. Heart disease, stroke, diabetes, type 2 preventable cancer. None of them crash dramatically. None of them trend on social media. And so none of them feel real until they are. The science behind this is decades old, Nobel Prize-winning, and still being ignored in almost every major decision you're making right now. Let's go back to where this started. 1973. 2 psychologists at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, published a paper in cognitive psychology that would eventually help earn a Nobel Prize. They asked people a simple question. In the English language, do more words start with the letter R or have R as their third letter? Most people answered, start with R. The actual answer, third letter, by a significant margin. Why did almost everyone get it wrong? Because words starting with R, run, river, road, are easy to pull up. Words with R as the third letter, car, fall, word, burn, take effort to find. And your brain read easy to find as more common. This is the availability heuristic. Your brain substitutes a hard question, how likely is this, with an easier one. How quickly can I think of an example? Those 2 questions almost never have the same answer. But your brain doesn't know that. Now add a second layer. In 1979, psychologist Paul Slovic and his colleagues at the University of Oregon asked hundreds of people to rate the risk of 90 different hazards, from car accidents and cigarettes to nuclear power and tornadoes. What they found was systematic. Across every category, people's perceived risk diverged from statistical reality in predictable, measurable ways. Botulism, overestimated. Tornadoes, overestimated. Floods, overestimated. Heart disease, underestimated. Stroke, underestimated. Diabetes, underestimated. The pattern wasn't random. Slovic identified what he called the dread factor. Risks that feel catastrophic, uncontrollable, and invisible, like a nuclear accident or a plane crash, generate disproportionate fear, regardless of their actual statistical frequency. Risks that are common, slow-moving, and personally controllable, like the effects of a poor diet, generate almost no fear at all, even when they kill 4 more people every year. And here's where the third mechanism locks it all in place: media exposure. Tversky and Kahneman noted it in their original 1973 paper. Availability isn't just about memory. It's about how information reaches you. A plane crash that kills 200 people receives weeks of global coverage. Heart disease that kills 700,000 Americans in a single year receives almost none. The result? After the crash, plane travel feels 10 times more dangerous than it did the week before, despite the fact that not a single statistic changed. What changed was availability, and availability changed everything. This is the architecture of the problem. The availability heuristic, substituting ease of recall for actual probability. The dread factor, amplifying fear for vivid, catastrophic risks while numbing it for silent, statistical ones. Media amplification, flooding your memory with dramatic events while filtering out the ones that kill quietly. 3 mechanisms working together, making sure your risk calculator is almost always wrong. Now here's the part that actually matters. Each of these mechanisms has a documented countermeasure. Here's how to use them. 3 mechanisms, 3 countermeasures. And unlike the fear your brain manufactures, these are grounded in the same research that identified the problem. Countermeasure 1, the outside view, against availability heuristic, Tversky and Kahneman. Kahneman and Tversky didn't just identify the bias, they proposed the fix. They called it reference class forecasting, or in simpler terms, the outside view. The idea: when you're assessing risk or making a prediction, don't ask what comes to mind. Ask what actually happened to a reference class of similar situations. Your brain is running an inside view, focused on this specific event, colored by what's vivid and recent. The outside view forces it to zoom out and look at the distribution. In practice, before deciding flying is too dangerous, look up the actual lifetime odds. Not once, every time the fear comes back. Repetition creates competing availability. Before pulling out of the market after a crash, look up one thing. How many times in history did the US market fail to recover? That number is 0. The outside view doesn't make the fear disappear. It gives your brain better data to work with. Countermeasure 2, deliberate base rate exposure, against dread factor, Slovic. Slovic's research showed that dread operates through affect, through feeling, which means debiasing it requires working at the level of feeling, not just logic. The technique? Deliberately place the dreaded risk next to its actual base rate. Not to convince yourself it's safe, to give your memory a competing image. Here's what this looks like. If you have a fear of flying, don't just know the statistic. Picture it. 1 in 11,000 lifetime odds versus 1 in 101 for a car. Visualize the comparison, not just read it. Because the dread factor works through vivid imagery. You counter it with vivid imagery. In health decisions, instead of searching symptoms of the rare disease you just read about, search the top 5 causes of death for your age group. Make the silent killers visible, because your brain can only feel what it can see. Countermeasure 3, the Two-Question Audit against media amplification. Tversky and Kahneman, Gigerenzer. Gigerenzer spent his career arguing for what he called risk literacy, the ability to read statistics the way a doctor reads a chart. The core skill: when you encounter a scary number in the media, ask 2 questions before reacting. Question 1. How many people does this actually affect per year? Question 2. Compared to what? Shark attacks kill approximately 5 people globally per year. Compared to what? Drowning kills 320,000. The headline is accurate. The fear it generates is not. At work, when your team panics after one bad incident, ask, is this a trend or an incident? What is our historical frequency for this type of event? One data point is not pattern. Availability bias turns incidents into patterns. The Two-Question Audit turns them back into what they actually are. 3 countermeasures. The outside view, to replace vivid memory with base rate reality. Deliberate base rate exposure, to give your brain a competing image for dreaded risks. The Two-Question Audit, to strip media headlines of the fear they manufacture. None of these eliminate the feeling. They just stop the feeling from making the decision. Here's what I want you to take from this series. 5 biases, 5 videos. Sunk cost fallacy, Dunning-Kruger effect, confirmation bias, negativity bias, availability bias. Every single one of them was running in the background of decisions you made today. Not because you're irrational, not because you're weak, because you have a human brain doing exactly what it was built to do, in a world it was never built for. Fear isn't wrong. Fear is data. The problem is when your brain collects that data from the wrong sources and makes decisions based on what's vivid instead of what's real. One question before you go. Think of something you're genuinely afraid of, something you avoid, something that shapes a decision you make regularly. Have you ever actually looked up the base rate? Drop it in the comments. Don't look it up first. Just tell me what it is, and let's find out together whether the fear matches the math. If this series changed how you see your own brain, subscribe, because we're just getting started. I'll see you then.